Hey gang, I'm Brian, a licensed psychotherapist in Florida and also a person in long-term addiction recovery myself. Today I wanted to talk about some of the nuance around addiction, sobriety, trauma, and messages that we hear in recovery circles, the helpful ones, the confusing ones, and the ones that accidentally set people up for self-abandonment instead of healing. This is absolutely not an anti-12 step talk. I want to be very clear about that. Peer-led recovery is what saved my life, and those programs continue to be very, very helpful for people every day. But there are some gaps and places where that culture oversimplifies what's actually going on under the hood. Gabor Mate talks about this a lot, addiction as adaptation, not moral failure. Trauma not being just the bad things that happened, but also the connection and attunement that didn't happen. Emotional patterns that get mislabeled as defects instead of signals. So today, what I want to talk about is 9 key pieces that I see over and over in therapy and recovery communities and in my own history. Why addiction develops, why people suppress emotions, why some recovery sayings help and others are confusing, and why some folks get mislabeled as bipolar when the real issue is that they just need some help regulating their emotions. This is about how healing actually happens through connection, not through punishment. So think of this one as a map of where addiction comes from, why some people stay stuck even after the substances are gone, and what it takes to rebuild yourself from the inside out. Like many people with addictions, I spent years in the same cycle hating myself for repeatedly doing the same thing over and over and over again, despite telling myself and other people that I loved that I was going to change, and with every intention to change, but the inability to follow through. So if you have not heard of Dr. Kevin McCulley and his um, documentary Pleasure Unwoven, which I watched when I was in treatment myself, that is a really great starting point. And just as a quick takeaway, it's about how addiction is a chronic medical condition that reshapes the brain and the nervous system, and that it has nothing to do with morality, and it's not about your character or your willpower. It's about how substances hijack 2 major systems, the reward system, which is your survival autopilot, and then also the prefrontal cortex, which is your brakes, judgment, and understanding of consequences. Drugs flood the reward system with dopamine, and then the brain starts to reorganize itself around that signal, telling the person who is sick with addiction, this is essential for survival. And I don't know about you, but I would do some really messed up stuff if I was placed in a situation where it was either this or being dead. And for the sick person's brain, the drug equals survival. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex loses efficiency, which is why people minimize their problems, they act impulsively, and then feel genuinely disgusted with themselves or feel regret just moments later. So, is it a disease? Absolutely yes. And disease model doesn't explain everything. Addiction is also a response to pain, to disconnection, childhood patterns, and to ways that somebody had to adapt emotionally long before the substances ever showed up. So you can take alcohol away, but if you don't address the emotional disconnection that is underneath it, nothing truly changes. That is why somebody can be sober for 20 years and still stuck in the same old patterns. Addiction is an adaptation first, disease second. Understanding both sides is what moves people forward. I'm going to talk about why emotional suppression is a root problem. One, maybe not but one of many, and why peer-led recovery programs often miss this piece. Recovery culture sends a lot of messages like, you are the problem, or your emotions lie to you, or I can't trust my own thoughts, my best thinking got me here, self-pity is a defect. And to some extent, some of that is true, that for a lot of people with addictions, their emotions are really extreme or maybe disproportional to the things that take place. But the message underneath that is that they can't trust themselves, or that they shouldn't trust their feelings, or they shouldn't trust their instincts. And that is not teaching humility, that's self-abandonment. And most people who have addictions have already spent years, probably even decades, cutting themselves off from what feels real. And they weren't ever taught how to regulate their feelings, they were taught how to hide or suppress them. Grief is not the same thing as self-pity, and resentment is not a character defect. They are warning lights, something in the soul that says something is wrong. Shame is a wound, not a defect. Self-pity is overwhelm, not weakness. Resentment is information that your boundaries have been crossed or that you have abandoned yourself. And there's another problem. A lot of people in recovery that I have worked with have been misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, not because they have month-long mood cycles of mania or depression, but that they have intense emotional swings hour to hour or minute to minute. And that is not bipolar disorder. That is a nervous system that is haywire, trying to recalibrate from years of stress, trauma, withdrawal, and emotional neglect. Now, I want to clarify again, I refer my clients, almost all of them, to peer-led programs. No matter what the presenting problem is, I believe in 12-step programs, and I refer people all the time. They save lives. It saved my life. But they can also accidentally reinforce the original injury, which is disconnection from the self. People stop drinking, but they never reconnect with the person that's underneath all of that. And that's why emotional work isn't optional, it's the heart of recovery. I see a lot of clients that I have to use a PTSD diagnosis in order to get insurance to pay for treatment. And I let them know, this is what we have to do to check a box, right? But trauma is not always a dramatic event. A lot of the time, it's the absence of what people needed: warmth, safety, reflection, consistency, feeling understood, and feeling valued. Kids will abandon their emotional truth if it feels like that's what they have to do in order to stay attached to their caregivers. Years later, that abandoned emotional life becomes empty space that addiction rushes to fill. Substances then become the shortcut just to feel something, feel nothing, feel safe, feel grounded, feel connected, any of those things. And so certain slogans like crush your ego or your thinking is the problem completely miss the point. For some people, ego is probably a factor in that, sure, but I think that this is also overlooking the emotional disconnection and the lack of internal regulation. You don't heal addiction by shaming feelings. You heal addiction by restoring connection to the emotional life that somebody had to silence. Nobody starts using, or drinking because they crave destruction. They start because the substance does something to their nervous system that they weren't able to do on their own. It helps them feel regulated, or it numbs, or it energizes, or softens, or quiets, helps them socially lubricate and connect, or it distracts. Addiction solves a problem until the cost outweighs the relief. I've heard people say in peer-led recovery that they are grateful to be an alcoholic, and I think I have even said that. Uh, and I think that what they meant is that the suffering in addiction forced them into change, that low points can become turning points, and that's real. Pain does produce honesty and sometimes humility. But here's a healthier middle ground. You can be grateful for what suffering taught you without being grateful for the disease or the wiring that caused the suffering. You don't have to sanctify a neurological condition to honor insight that it brought. So the real question isn't why the addiction, it's why the pain and why the disconnection and what made addiction feel necessary. And that's where healing really takes place. People don't get better because somebody lectures them or shames them. They get better because somebody actually meets them with understanding long enough for their defenses to finally relax. I love internal family systems. I use it with clients who have addictions and who don't. And IFS makes it painfully clear that inside everyone there are protective parts. IFS calls these managers and firefighters. Your manager parts are the ones that are proactive, like being a perfectionist or being a people pleaser. And then you have your firefighters, which are your reactive parts, the ones that are avoiders and numbers. And beneath all of them are your exiles, usually younger, hurt emotional experiences that have never been soothed. You can't bully or shame those parts into change, and you can't discipline your way into emotional regulation. You can't white knuckle your way into internal safety. Healing happens through connection, and this is something that peer-led recovery gets right because we need connection to others, but I think something that sometimes loses focus is the connection to you first, to yourself. For a lot of people who have addictions, they have a quick forgetter and they lose perspective fast. In early recovery, people can forget their pain quickly. The consequences start to fade as they clean up their life, the shame starts to blur, and the memory of the last time becomes kind of distant. This isn't irresponsibility, it's neurological. The memory and reward system repair faster than the emotional and impulse control systems, and that is why structure, repetition, meetings, routines, and daily practice matter. Not as punishment, but as a scaffolding while the brain starts to recalibrate. And peer-led programs are phenomenal for that stage. They give daily rhythm and accountability while the nervous system starts to stabilize. The whole reason that I started my business and this podcast, which I never imagined creating a podcast, who the hell wants to listen to me, is because I think that some things have been missing from peer-led recovery. You can't treat addiction with just behavior change, or just trauma work, or just having knowledge of your neurobiology. And I don't think that you can do it from just spirituality, or just meetings, or just therapy. You need the whole picture. Emotional, biological, psychological, relational, behavioral, and meaning-making pieces. Peer programs offer community. Therapy offers depth. Trauma work offers repair. Skills training offers regulation. Boundaries offer structure. Together, that's integrated recovery, and that is what sticks long term. So I want to encourage anyone out there who has found it off-putting to hear in a peer-led recovery meeting, your best thinking got you here. No, your adaptations got you here. Or if you've heard self-pity is a defect, no, it's a sign of you being overwhelmed. If you've heard resentment is the number one offender that takes more people back out than anything else. Yes, resentment can be toxic, but it's also information about boundaries. So if you've heard that you can't trust your feelings, that is the opposite of healing. Programs like this can give you structure, identity, ritual, and accountability, but they don't teach emotion regulation, they don't repair trauma, and they don't help you connect with your internal system. They are an exceptional foundation, but I have found for me it's not the whole house. So what actually worked was slowing down, listening, and connecting. That's where everything starts to come together. The antidote to addiction is not abstinence alone. It's reconnection to yourself, to others, to your internal signals, to your story, and to your nervous system. That requires you to slow down. A lot of people with addictions live fast internally, and I have known friends in recovery or clients who arrest their substance use, but they don't have the ability to slow down. Always what's next, or working themselves to death. And it's really an inability to slow down or to get quiet. And many of them still react quickly, commit fast, talk fast, defend fast, and stillness feels dangerous. Slowing down feels like exposure. But slowing down also creates the space where choice becomes possible. Choice is the beginning of agency. Agency is the beginning of real freedom. And freedom is the beginning of a life that isn't driven by survival. So, recovery should not be about self-abandonment. Really should be the opposite. Rebuilding a relationship with yourself that you were never able to have. Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful, please share it with somebody else. And in the meantime, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and I'll see you on the next one.